One conversation I had in particular was with a CEO of a company that will be public. And this was like his fourth or fifth company. He asked me the same question. And I'm like, why are you doing it? Like, you're older than me. You're more successful. He goes, Dan, do you ever play video games? I go, yeah, I love video games. He's like, do you still play video games? I'm like, I do still play video games. I love video games. He's like, so do I. But this business is a video game. And it's a video game that other people gave me money to play. And if I win, not only will I make them money, I'll make money too. And I love the video game. And I'm like, you're right. Like, the journey is the prize. I say this to everybody, everyone that inevitably I have a career conversation with. At some point, I'll say the following, which is people that optimize for money are not happy, and people that optimize for happiness end up finding money.
Cool. Welcome to another episode of the Karnjanaprakorn Show. I got my good friend Dan that I've known, I want to say for over a decade, probably like early New York tech startup scene. We kept bumping into each other at different events. I would say he is a very accomplished serial entrepreneur, went through 4 different acquisitions. Tula got acquired by P&G, Troops by Salesforce, Spinback by Betting Media. All 3 companies are public. I would describe you as someone that just starts companies. It's in your blood. It's in your DNA. I think that's why we get along.
We both like to chew on glass.
Yeah. When there's the easy path and the hard path, we choose the hard path.
Exactly.
And I think we're both in the same place where we're thinking about what's next. I think you're approaching it and thinking about building a studio. I'm still running in circles, trying to figure out the meaning of life, but I thought it'd be good to catch up, to hear about what you're up to. I've also thought about a studio, and it sounds like you went pretty deep and you have a pretty interesting model. I would also love to talk about post-exit, as I'm navigating that for the first time. Love to get your advice, and we'll see where this conversation goes from there.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, always fun to catch up, and glad we can do it recorded and see where this goes. But yeah, maybe let's talk a little bit about the studio, which, by the way, actually isn't a formal studio. But I think to dig into that, I think it's helpful to rewind the clock a little bit and share context of how I landed there.
Sure.
So if we rewind the clock a little bit, you mentioned Spinback, which we sold to Buddy Media. Just to set context, that company helped online brands and retailers measure how much money they made from Facebook. So that company and ones previously in college and high school were really rooted in Internet 1.0, e-commerce, and so really cut my teeth on all things digital media marketing and e-commerce. Fast forward, I ended up stumbling into the health and beauty space, which became Tula skincare, and then kind of got back to software and started a venture-backed company called Troop. And these companies are being built at the same time in the same office in New York City. If you ever came to our office at that time, on one side, you'd see a bunch of beauty junkies. And then on the other side, you'd see a bunch of Gala engineers working on workflow automation software. But we're building these companies over the course of 5, 6, 7 years. And you touch on it, Tula ends up being acquired by Procter Gamble, and Troops ends up being acquired by Salesforce. But while I was building the businesses, I got to see in real time how those businesses were faring in the market and why. And there are many things that became obvious, but a few that were probably the most obvious were the following. The first was this idea that CPG companies are not venture-backed or private equity-backed type businesses. They can't be big companies, and they're too saturated or too competitive. But meanwhile, there we were building the company, doing incredibly well, profitable, breaking through the noise and winning. And I just remember thinking all of the sacred cows that I were shown while we were building the business and the reasons I told the company would not work were just completely not true.
Mm-hmm.
We were proving all of those things wrong. Meanwhile, on the Troop side, and by the way, that business model is very straightforward and is still to this day. You make a thing, you put it in a box, and you put it on the digital shelf, and you sell product. It's a very knowable business model and easy to understand. On the other hand, we were building Troops, which was such fun and exciting. We were inventing a category. It was reimagining how work gets done in the enterprise and getting people to rethink their day-to-day workflow at work. And, that is really hard to do. like really hard, trying to convince people that they shouldn't be using classic fields, forms, buttons, and boxes to update their most important mission critical customer information in systems like Salesforce, but instead they should do it in systems like Slack. So in many ways, I mentioned chewing on glass. We were chewing on a lot of glass because it was really hard to build a category. And at the same time, I remember thinking and hearing at the Salesforce days, what an amazing company and business model Salesforce was. I would hear from the executives there. It was an annuity business. It just prints cash. You lock in these annual, biannual, multi-year agreements, and you could predict revenue really well. And Salesforce obviously has done it better than probably most. Great gross margins. But then I remember looking at the Troops business, remember thinking, wow, engineering salaries are much higher than I remember them being and going up. And wow, there's a lot of copycat competitors now coming into the market because the barriers to entry are quite low. And like the pricing pressure is getting harder than it ever been. So I'm like, all of the things that I heard and believed and saw that were great about SaaS were kind of becoming less and less true. And fast forward, we see the great tech implosion, all of the layoffs at Google and Facebook. So there was a lot of bloat in the ecosystem. Money was free. The business models, the companies just got ahead of themselves. Meanwhile, I had this other profitable company running over here and realized if you just build a company the way you should, which is like be disciplined, build a company that's profitable, you can do quite well. And oh, by the way, we touched on M&A. In the M&A dimension for these sectors, in TPG, you've got companies where the strategic acquirers, they don't really build companies for growth. They buy exclusively. Like when was the last time you'd seen a L'Oreal or an Estee Lauder incubate and build a very successful brand? It's not that it's not that they can't. Maybe they actually just can't, or they don't want to. It's just not in their DNA anymore. Whereas on the tech side, when we were going through M&A, a lot of the conversations we were having were the build buy was maybe we can build this, or maybe we can buy it, or maybe, and that introduces a lot of friction in the acquisition process. So we had a much more knowable glide path to exit here, much more rinse and repeat in that ecosystem. Here it was more work, more friction. Ultimately, we landed in the right home in a way we felt really good about. But just seeing those two side by side got me thinking, these consumer businesses, if you execute well and you build the right teams, you just really discipline in operating, you can break through the noise and you can win and you can have exits and outcomes that are very meaningful to founders and shareholders. And because they're much more easy to understand, they're probably easier to hire against and build teams around. And as I stumble into that mindset, I remember thinking about comments and quotes that I'm going to butcher for sure by like Warren Buffett, which the essence is like, he'll only invest in companies he can understand or an idiot can run because one day one will. And it's not to say that any of the people I work with in the consumer companies are idiots. They're not. On the contrary, they're some of the smartest people I work with. It's just they're simpler. And you know this, you ran a company, like the simpler you can keep things, the simpler, the easier it is to execute. But all that brought me to, well, maybe I should just try to build more of these consumer brands because I think there's other opportunities. But that's the setup.
I'm curious to hear about how it actually works. So I'm on the website now. It says company builders. We build companies. We are a venture studio investment firm that builds new companies by partnering with amazing operators and founders, talent and influencers, and deploying proven and successful playbook. So how are you thinking about like how many companies are you launching? Is it going to be in multiple different space verticals, or are you just building SaaS tools or businesses, or how are you like, how's this going to be different? Because every time I hear about a venture studio, the number one thing,
they don't work.
They don't work. People are like, oh, it's so hard to hire the talent. There's so much luck and timing involved with it. Name one that's worked. And then the ones that people thought that were working, you hire a bunch of analysts. The ideas they kind of run through the gauntlet are super boring and they all go to happy hour with each other. So all the studios end up building the same things. Totally. So like, how is this going to work? Because I would love to do something like this too.
Yeah, for sure. The answer is they don't work. And to be clear, this is not even a real studio. It's not even a real company. Like And that was by design and
Yeah.
deliberate. And the website is even in of itself an experiment. I went on this journey also. I spoke to a lot of the incubators and studios out there because the academic thought exercise is really intriguing, right? Like, how cool would it be if you had a holding company and
Yes.
a fund or a team and infrastructure that can crank out successful unicorn? Who wouldn't want that? Like a unicorn factory? Are you kidding me? Sign me up. Like I think every repeat founder goes to that thought exercise because they've done it once or twice and they think they could rinse and repeat and do it, infinitum. I don't think that's possible. And to be clear, I don't think I can either. And because I don't think I can, what I realize is that having a formal studio with real infrastructure and a fund attached to it is not a good idea. Why is it not a good idea? It puts you in the business of having to deploy capital. If your job is to invest, then you're looking for places to put money. And if you feel that pressure, then you might end up putting money to work in places that should never receive that money. Moreover, if you bring in outside capital, you have an inclination quite easily to build an infrastructure and team, which creates burn and this artificial clock against everything. And the last thing I'll say is every company and how they're started and how they came to be, they're all a unique snowflake. Like even if I started Tula again today or Troops again today, or if you did the same with your companies today, they would be very different companies, a different team and a different market. So you cannot truly rinse and repeat the same playbook. Like the world is just literally different. And when you add those things up, what you realize is like you need a lot of flexibility to construct each company in its own way that's unique and circumstantial for that business, for that opportunity, and for that time. And so why I put together that website, Company Builders, is really just to formalize the idea of what I'm doing now. And what I'm doing now is still building companies, primarily focused on, but not limited to, the consumer world. And again, why my focus on consumer is because I feel like I've accumulated a few unfair advantages that are applicable broadly across all consumer categories. What are they? Things like, these are going to sound dumb and obvious, but things like good discipline around accounting or working capital and demand planning, or good measurement and management against things like EBITDA, right? Like these aren't crazy concepts, but I would often get pitched because I angel invest a bunch. I would get pitched by other startup founders, especially in the consumer space, and I would ask for P&L or balance sheet. Credit to my co-founder, Ken, on these businesses, who has a finance and accounting background. And it's funny, like sometimes I ask for these things and they either don't have them or are shocked that I'm asking for it. And then when you peel the onion back and look at some of the financials for these businesses, you quickly, like, numbers tell a story and don't lie. And you like quickly get a sense of, do they know how to manage a business correctly or not? So I think just an unfair advantage around discipline and operating and executing is one. Another is, I'm a big believer in what people call influencer marketing. Are you more likely to buy a thing because you saw an ad for said thing, or because
100%.
your friend Mike, who you trust and you've listened to his podcast every week? Like, it's a no-brainer. So at Tula, one of the things we did is we took a SaaS concept in the SDR, BDR category, sales development rep, business development rep. Their jobs in SaaS was really to pick up the phone and email and just cold call and drop people down the funnel from cold outreach to engagement, conversation to contracting. At a time where beauty companies would hire a PR person to gift products, send a few notes to a few people, we industrialized that BDR concept for influencer marketing and built a machine around it with an operational rhythm and cadence and measurement at Tula. And that was one of the key growth engines for the business. And I bring that up because that is an unfair advantage, not just in terms of the operation, but these are also real human beings that I built relationships with, that I got a chance to work with and see who works and who doesn't. And so, for example, with Tula, the best performing influencer for us by a lot, Courtney Shield, is now my co-founder on Dibs Beauty. Well, the reason I started Dibs, part of it is because I saw what an amazing entrepreneur and influencer Courtney was, and felt like if I could marry what she did with us at Tula in her own brand with other things, like that would be pretty unique. So we launched Dibs and it's off to the races. So, and now I have another brand I'm working on that's a bit in self mode, back in kind of the skincare space in partnership with United Talent Agency. And,
Right.
and again, it's kind of like the same playbook. We have a bunch of things we'll do on the influencer marketing side, married with
Got
great
it.
discipline. And all these things will be financed a little bit differently, but they're all unique. They're all standalone companies.
Yeah. So it sounds like there is a playbook around consumer distribution through creators or influencers, financial discipline. But how do you come up with ideas? Is it like one company a year, or is it more whenever there's an opportunity? It could be one every few years, or it could be like 10 in a year if you find all the right puzzle pieces that fit.
Yeah, I think if I could find all the puzzle pieces that would fit, like I would do as many as I possibly could.
Uh-huh.
However, it takes time to find the puzzle pieces, and it also takes time to, even if you find the puzzle pieces, you still need to vet if they really fit together. And so that just takes time and kind of the pace that I'm going. I suspect I could probably do 1, 2 a year,
Got it.
maybe, or
Uh,
0.
It's weird to ask this question considering that we're both founders and I have my own process, which I describe as chaotic and creative. But like, how do you come up with ideas? How do you vet them? How do is it you're validating the idea and then you find the partner, the operator, or you find them first and then you guys kind of brainstorm ideas?
So before I answer the question head on, like, let me just give a setup, which is I think they're different. I think there are different types for entrepreneurs. So one example is the entrepreneur that has this itch they have to scratch or problem they have to solve their whole life. Right? It's like Elon Musk
Yeah,
has
yeah.
been living and breathing this idea of going to space his whole life, and he's doing that. I'm not that entrepreneur. Another entrepreneur is one that will do a fast follow or copycat playbook or
Hmm.
second mover for another proven thing. I'm also not that entrepreneur. There's another bucket, which I probably am, which is just much more opportunistic, which is like if there are pieces there that I think if dots can be connected, that could yield opportunity. And that could be in software, which clearly I've done, or beauty. And there's a blog post I wrote of how Tula started and read it. Then I think you'll get a clear sense of
Hmm.
that purely happened through happenstance and luck and just right place, right time and connecting dots. But to answer your question, my process happens, I think, typically now in maybe one of 3 ways. So the first is category identification. So I think, all right, if I'm going to play in consumer, what are categories that are compelling and interesting to me that I think have good gross margins, are maybe non-durable because I like replenishment businesses and a few other criteria. And so there's a short list of categories that I think are interesting. And so then I'll attempt to come up with what I think is an idea that is differentiated and have white space. And I'll just kind of
Got it.
put it on a shelf. So now while it's sitting on a shelf in parallel, I'm also looking for other co-founders in 2 categories. One is the influencer celebrity. I think community-led brands are the future of brands. It's not about D2C anymore. It was, but now everybody and their mother could build a D2C company. The problem is once you're live, yes, you could logistically sell stuff, but you need eyeballs and attention, and that is really hard. Guess who has the eyeballs and attention? The content creators. It's the influencers,
Hmm.
the YouTubers you mentioned. So for me, it's like, who are people out there that are waking up and realizing, wait a minute, I don't want to promote other people's stuff and make them money. I want
Yeah.
my own equity. I want my own assets. So I'm looking for people like that and having conversations with those people that might be in the Instagram ecosystem or YouTube or TikTok or Twitch, whatever. In that exercise, it's not just how many people have reach or engagement. It's also, are they a good human being? Like, are they an entrepreneur? Do they want to work? There's plenty of people I met, certainly in the celebrity category, that people would think everyone knows who they are. If they built a business, everybody would buy something from them. And that's just like categorically not true. Like many of those
Yeah.
people don't want to do the work. You have to be a founder. You have to want to get your hands
Yeah.
dirty. Like when I look at how Courtney is involved with Dibs or my new partner on the new thing, like they are rolling up their sleeves and doing functions that they never thought they would do. And that's like any entrepreneur and founder, what one must do. That's the second bucket. And then the third is because I know the second bucket, their superpower isn't to be CEO and to run the thing, it's to be out there. But I do need and want a full-time CEO that can run the thing because I don't want to in these businesses for a bunch of reasons, which I'm happy to get into. But I'm constantly meeting with people that I think could be or might be founder CEO material that maybe have never done it before and want to, or are at the stage in their career where they're ready to and maybe need a little bit of help and coaching. And those are the people that excite me because I love to work with people where my job, and I've thought about this even at Troops. Like my job is to make other people better
Yeah.
so that they can be successful. And I think this model lets me do that. And so by not having a full-time job within the company, I get to be completely unencumbered and focus on the things that I think I'm uniquely good at. One of them is recruiting and helping people see around corners and avoid the many, 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 many mistakes that I made.
So does your role kind of shift towards being the CEO of the studio where you're constantly thinking through ideas, meeting with talent, recruiting, I'm assuming fundraising or capital raising. And then once the companies kind of spin out, you're meeting with them on a frequency like a board member or chairman or something where you're working with them on the overall vision and strategy and just being a good advisor.
Yeah, I mean, I would think about it like a co-founder CEO, but more like I'm thinking about my role now as not even a CEO of a studio, but like a co-founder
Got it.
of at least one, if not a few companies, but with the intended desire to find and partner with another co-founder and CEO that ideally is better than me in the CEO position and ready, willing, able to take that on and hungry. One of the reasons I think the incubators fail, I just had a dinner with the first round capital guys and Josh were amazing. We were talking about
Yeah.
this and the comment he made was like, yeah, incubators are tough because like if you've got somebody living across the portfolio versus somebody that lives and breathes one company all day, every day, like you're just never going to compete. And he's totally right. And for that reason, in this model, I shouldn't be in these companies full time because I'm never going to compete or win versus the other entrepreneurs that are. But I think I could go find, and this is really hard, but it's possible. I could go find another co-founder that can take on that CEO job and is ready and willing, able and hungry to be that person. And I think I could be fuel to everything that they do and give them a huge competitive advantage in the market.
How are you thinking about financing this? Would it be like self-funded? Would it be a combination where if something hits some escape velocity, it goes down a more traditional VC path and they raise like a seed in Series A? How are you thinking
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah. It depends. But like in general, I think about it like two rounds of financing basically. So the first is to get the thing live and launched to market. So you do the back of the envelope math of how much you need to
Yeah.
get the product development done and the key hires made and the website. And then that's a number. And how do I finance that number? Well, I'll self-finance it with my partners and/or we'll do a friends and family angel round. And how much I invest depends on the idea circumstance, syndicate of investors. There was one deal I did where I was prepared to do most, if not the whole round, but we had so much demand from
Got it.
friends and family. Like, so again, not trying to be greedy. And then you're live, and once you're in market, then the idea is hopefully you're doing well and you're proving success to justify growth. And in particular, in the consumer world, growth in my mind means you've proven yourself online and now you're maybe ready for a retail rollout, which also requires capital. So at that point, maybe you do another round of financing to invest in an accelerated growth in retail or in an omni-channel experience. And then you're done financing because the idea hopefully is that you've done your job, you've built those businesses close to, if not profitably, and you just build and you take those profits and
Yeah.
reinvest for growth.
What do you think is going to be the hardest part of this whole idea?
The puzzle pieces, these things only work if you get the perfect marriage of right category, right product differentiation, right influencer, content creator, and right CEO and operating team. That is really,
Yeah.
really hard, really hard.
Do you think all those
And
pieces are equally as hard, or do you think like talent CEO is going to be the hardest hire?
I would say individually they are easy isn't the right word. They're individually they're easier, but to a lot, it's like putting in a key. Like you need all of the things to align because if one does not, the key does not
Yeah.
turn. So, for example, there's a product category I'm looking at now that I think I'm pretty excited about, but I'm like, I could launch it without the content creator, but I'm like, but then I don't have that unfair advantage. And then I'm going to be grinding and like, I'd rather have the unfair advantage built in from day
Yeah.
or as many unfair advantages. If I don't have that unfair advantage built in, then by default, what that would mean is I should probably be in that business full time to be that added unfair advantage. But I don't want to and should not be right now
Yeah.
full time. And so therefore I must get all of the Navy SEALs and weapons at the table before I go into battle.
So follow-up question is after 4 exits, why are you doing this? Like, why not ride off into the sunset and retire and spend all of your time, money, and energy in philanthropy and spending time with your family and investing and 'cause operating, even if you're not running the companies,
Totally.
because
Well, it's like, why are you doing a podcast? I'll put it this
yeah,
way. When I was going through the M&A conversations, one conversation I had in particular was with a CEO of a company that will be public. And the same thing. This was like his fourth or fifth company he was on, very successful. And he asked me the same question. And I'm like, why are you doing it? Like, you're older than me. You're more successful. He goes, Dan, do you ever play video games? I go, yeah, I love video games. He's like, do you still play video games? I'm like, I do still play video games. I love video games. He's like, so do I. But this business is a video game. And it's a video game that other people gave me money to play. And if I win, not only will I make them money, I'll make money too. And I love the video game. And I'm like, you're right. Like the journey is the prize. People that optimize for money are not happy, and people that optimize for happiness end up finding money. So I just watched, I think this morning, a snippet of Jerry Seinfeld giving his commencement graduation speech at Duke. And he talked better than me about a very similar idea, which was like when he was first getting started, he was just like, can I tell jokes to just make enough money to make myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? He's like, don't worry about the money. That will come later. Focus on a job that's just cool. He's just like, I wanted a cool job. And for me, the journey is the prize. It's just cool. I can't help myself. It's like a giant puzzle or video game. And while there are other cool, fun things that could be doing, like, I don't know, I love to ski, I love to golf, but like, I don't know, I don't think I could do those things
yeah.
5 days a week or full time. Like this stuff is way more interesting and fun. And if it works, yeah, you could make more money, but that's not why I'm doing this.
That makes a lot of sense. So what's like a typical day look like for you right now?
I need to figure this out. I need to do a better job of this. It depends. Every week I do have standing meetings with my companies. I definitely have a weekly management and founder meeting with the companies, at least an hour, if not longer sometimes. So that happens. And then I'll also have other standing meetings that are more functional in nature. In one company, I'm leaning in and helping right now with technology, infrastructure build out, like data warehousing and analytics. So I'm leaning in more and rolling up my sleeves there. In another company, we're actively recruiting and hiring for a few roles. So I'm having a bunch of meetings and interviewing a bunch of people. So every day is different. And the gift and the curse with this is like, on one hand, I kind of miss the routine, but then when you have the routine, you kind of wish you had freedom. But then when you have freedom, you kind of wish you had the routine. The same is true with the team, right? And being in office, I feel like I don't have an office, and or sometimes I love not having an office, but many times I'm like, oh man, especially when I go visit friends in New York City in their offices that are fun and big and buzzing and people like, oh, I so wish having this again. I wish I had a place to come to every day with the team and do the coffees. But like, then when you're there, so the grass is always greener. I'm still figuring it out, honestly.
Yeah. Tied to this, after going through 4 different exits and selling different companies, I would imagine you know what the post-exit is going to be like, all the different emotions that you feel, kind of navigating what to do next. What I'm asking selfishly because I'm going through it now, but what are some of the learnings you had of just going through that process for maybe other founders that are curious or going through it right now?
Yeah. The biggest learning for me on this dimension was post Spinback and Buddy Media. So we merged Spinback with Buddy Media because we felt like Facebook was going to go public, and within the next year, when that would happen at around probably $100 billion valuation, we felt like the leading B2B platform would be worth a lot, at 1%, 2%. And we felt like Buddy Media was the leader. We had a very complimentary 1+1=3 situation. So we're like, all right, we should merge with Buddy Media.
Yeah.
There's a good chance we get acquired. And after we did the merger, 13 months later, we got acquired by Salesforce. But when that happened, because I went to that wasn't my company, it was Mike Lazaro's company.
Mhm.
Him and Cass built an amazing business. Like it was their show, and I was going to have a job at Salesforce, which Salesforce is a great company, but I wasn't ready for a job. As we were negotiating that deal, I basically renegotiated my exit so that I would leave the same day we closed with Salesforce. So I never actually went over to Salesforce. As a result of doing that, as a mid-20 something year old, I left a lot of money on the table for a mid-20 something year old. And my parents thought I was insane. They're like, just chill out, And I was back to like the happiness money relationship comment earlier. Like I was more afraid to have a good job in which I knew I would do well over time and get promoted and do well and I was more afraid of that and getting complacent than not having any job and being free to like go after whatever it is that I would go after. Everyone thought I was insane. In hindsight, it was one of the best ROI decisions I ever made, because had I not done that, I would have never started Tula and Troops. But in that moment, it was fucking crazy.
I
I
bet.
say that unequivocally. But so I quit, and then I had a new business that I thought I was going to build in the healthcare tech space that it just didn't work out. And so very quickly, I found myself doing nothing. And at first it was great because here I was, I'm like, I could do anything. But very quickly I found myself in this paradox of choice and analysis paralysis, which is like, I can do anything, but because I could do anything, I wasn't doing anything.
I fully
Afraid.
relate to this.
Yeah. Like I was afraid to swing at anything. So eventually I was like, I just need to keep searching for the next thing. One of the VC firms that was going to invest in Spinback, a family office called Great Oaks Capital, the founder went to
Yeah.
University of Wisconsin, where I went. He was like, why don't you just come work out of our office? You live a few blocks away. Let's look at deals together. You figure out what you want to do. You leverage our balance sheet. We'll leverage your networking, operating experience. Maybe we'll do deals together. So for like a year and a half, I worked out of their office and I would go to work. But like, I didn't have a job. My job was to figure out what I wanted to do. And it was honestly the most, and my wife knows this, like it was the most depressing year of my life. At a time when people thought I was like fun employed and
Yeah.
like, we went on vacation. Me and my wife went on vacation and traveled for like a month. It was amazing. But like when I got back, it was the most depressed I had ever been professionally because I had no passion and purpose, which again is a good reminder, like money is not what it's about. And so I finally got to this place of frustration, which is like, I have no ideas that I'm excited about. And maybe I should just get back to like problem solution. And the problem space that I knew really well was what I was doing at Buddy Media and Spinback. And it became very clear to me that a lot of the work we wanted to do, we just never got to finish because of the acquisitions. So I basically went back and thought in a very layman's sense, I'm like, there's a Spinback or Buddy Media 2.0 that I could probably go run at. So I started putting the pen and paper on what that business could look like, what the product could look like. And I reconnected with all my old customers, one of them being QVC. I pitched them my SaaS idea. They pitched me their idea, which was they wanted to prove they could launch brands digitally. They'd never done it before. Beauty was the fastest growing category. I know your business well. I know digital well. I don't know anything about beauty. While I was working out of the office, I met this guy, Ken, who started a beauty company. In short, that's how Tula was born. And I was like, fuck it. All the pieces are there. I've never done beauty before. I'm losing my mind, not doing anything. But this seems like all the pieces are there. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put software on the shelf and I'm going to try to be a beauty entrepreneur. And so what I learned then was like sharks that stop swimming die, and you need to just keep moving. And it took me building Tula to then realize the real business I wanted to be building, which became Troops. I wanted to be back in software. And Troops happened much, much quicker after I started Tula. Once I was in the mix again, building, it became even easier to think about what became Troops. And so knowing all of that, as we were exiting and selling Tula to P&G and Troops to Salesforce that year, the Dibs opportunity popped up. And I'm like, I'm definitely going to invest in this now and get it seeded and let them start moving, because I know there's a very good chance that after exit, I might be unemployed again. And I don't want to be back to where I was. So I want to have another company that I could be working on. So let me like get the iron in the fire now. And like you got it in the oven. And then I went and got the other companies across the finish line. And then, the funny thing is I was really excited to stick around at Salesforce and Slack for a while, because Salesforce bought Slack for $30 billion. And here we were being able to be a bit of the glue and help make that reality and work closely with like Brett Taylor and Stewart.
Yeah.
But then both of those guys left. And I was like, so anyway, very quickly, I was out of Salesforce and then had the free time to lean in to Dibs and kick up some of these other companies, which is what I'm doing now.
Love to get your advice on, I guess I'm working through this idea maze. I feel like a lot of founders that I talk to, they all follow a similar path. They sell their company or leave their company, go through identity shift, identity crisis. They have a lot of free time. They do all the fun things and they get depressed, and then they resurface. Then when they resurface, they usually go through this cycle of, I'm going to become an angel investor, and then I'm going to become an advisor and coach founders. And then I'm going to spend a lot of time donating to nonprofits. They go through that, and some of them get really deep into one of those three things, or all three, or two out of the three. The people that don't, where they wear the hats, they go back to square one where they're kind of lost again. I kind of feel like I'm going through that cycle between starting a company or co-founding a company or incubating one. Because as an entrepreneur, you're always coming up with ideas. Like, it's just part of how your brain works. And I look at all these fun projects I could work on.
By the way, you left a few off the
There's
list,
another-
which were like become a VC,
Oh,
or
yeah.
buy an air conditioning company,
Yes.
or invest and buy a bunch of real estate.
Yeah.
Or
I looked at
yeah.
HVAC. I looked at boring businesses. I'm currently looking at a Shopify app I have no good reason other than I was like, cool, someone sent it to me. Let me check it out. Yeah, it's all over the place.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, the cop-out answer to start with is like, you let your energy and passion and curiosity dictate that answer. Because I mean, this, like even with hiring, or probably most decisions you made, by the time if you've gotten to the point where you've had to do the pros and cons column, like you've already lost. You've already lost.
Yeah.
Like, it's the right answer. And when look, I'm an engineer. I'm a very analytical thinker, and I'm pretty objective on many things. But I know even then, if I'm doing the assessment and SWOT, I've already lost. So I think you have to use your instincts and intuition to lead you, and let your curiosity be the thing that drives you to whatever it is next. And then when you get there, I just wouldn't overthink it. Just kind of do what is fun and see where it goes. It's kind of like I'm the company builder. I don't want to formalize this,
Yeah.
but I did it because I'm kind of doing it. So let me just push it forward a little bit more and see where it goes. And I'll know if it feels right or wrong. And if it feels right, I'll keep pushing. And if it doesn't, then I'll pull back. That's one. Also, part of why I'm doing the consumer thing is, look, I think I'd prefer to be building a tech company, but I don't have any ideas, at least right now, that I'm super passionate about. And so absent that, I'm thinking about the world a little bit more like private equity, in that there's noble categories, noble market, noble business models that, again, if you put the pieces together, could be great companies to build and scale and sell, or take public. And so because I don't have a huge list of crazy out there, what could be the next Uber or Airbnb, I'm like keeping it simple. But it's not to say that if I stumbled into one of those, I wouldn't not do it. And so as a result, I'm just the creative part of my brain, I'm just trying to leverage across those brands and in other areas like philanthropy and whatever. But, look, there is no right answer here. And this is why it is hard, because believe me, if we had the answer, you'd already be doing the thing.
And I might even be doing that thing with content. So we'll see.
I mean, look, we were just talking about content creators and how they are becoming, you know this better than anyone. Like they're content creators, some of it. Mr. Beast is Exhibit A. He is Disney. Like he's going to be bigger than Disney.
Yes.
He started off doing a version of what you're doing, creating content and putting it on the internet. And he will have, and if not already, a multi-billion-dollar empire. And there's no reason that this cannot be that. If you take that at its limit in 5-10 years, and if you invest more time and energy, like this could be the thing. This could be it, right?
Yeah, the model that I thought would always work would be, I like creating content, I like starting companies. And the third bucket I would say is I tried advising and I tried investing, but I've been getting more interested in the philanthropy side. So I was curious to hear, because I know you do a lot of it, and I love the quote that you said around investing your time, energy, and money. Obviously, you do that with your companies, you can do that with your family, but it seems like you also put a lot of effort and time into philanthropy. So is that something that brings a lot of joy? Why do you do it? Any tips for someone that's, I guess, kind of venturing to that for the first time?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm doing probably more than I ever thought I would be doing this early, which I'll get into. But before, probably the thing that made this world, there are two things that really enlightened me to this world of philanthropy. The first was philanthropy with time. So I've been volunteering as a member of National Ski Patrol for over 20 years.
Wow.
It's a paramedic on skis. And I remember you go out to work patrolling the mountain, and occasionally you come into these instances where you'll come to treat or help somebody that thought they'd get up and go have a great morning of skiing, and they'd go have lunch, and maybe they'd go ski some more and do operate ski. And like some of those people just don't make it through the day. And when you encounter situations like that up close, you realize how short life is and how we must make the most of our time here, and how like giving back in that way with time compared to anything I did at work didn't compare, like not even close. So I was really lucky at a young age to have that experience. I've done it for over 20 years still to today. The other thing that stuck with me growing up is I remember I would go to these schools or hospitals, and I would see my parents, grandparents would point out like this other family that had donated, and their names would be on buildings of like these schools and hospitals. I remember thinking, or museums, I'm like, how cool is that? You could work hard and then will this thing into the world that's a huge net positive for society, school or museums, hospitals. So how cool would it be if you also made some money to be able to do that? And so now that I have a little bit more money, I'm doing more of that.
I guess tied to that, are you still angel investing into tech startups as well? Is that something that you're continuing to do, or are you just solely focused on philanthropy and incubating companies?
I'm doing a bunch of angel investing. The way I would characterize the angel investing is like, what am I not doing? I'm not doing crazy due diligence.
Yeah.
I'm not doing discounted cash flow models. I'm not doing 5 different references. It's like, I'll have a call with the founder. I'll do the quick, like horse race jockey thing. Like, do they have the right founding team? Is the market big enough? Like, is the product unique and differentiated? And like, I'll make a decision pretty quickly. Ideally, the best case scenario for me is I'm a co-investor along a very good lead investor. Not that I need it or want it, but it's just great to know there's a bigger piggy bank sitting around the table with smart money. I'll force myself to think on the decision for 24 hours at least, because if I don't, I'll definitely be broke, because I'm an optimistic guy and I'd like to be helpful. So I would definitely say yes to everybody, try to force myself to sleep on it for at least 24 hours. And then I'll try to give an answer back to the founder within 2 to 4 days. I might do some homework. And that's it. And for me, it's less about the financial return, and it's more about like we were in that position, raising money. I mean, how excited are we when we were getting started, when we had founders say, yeah, they'll invest. So in a way, it's like giving back. The other thing is back to the work I'm doing now, it's a great way to continue to build a network of what I think are amazing founder operator types, because the game is long and there's a non-zero chance that maybe end up working with some of these people in another capacity in the future.
Well, cool, Dan. This has been super helpful. Love hearing about what you're building, all the lessons you're sharing with post exits, how you're investing your time, money, and energy into other founder operators, philanthropy, nonprofits, causes. So super inspiring. Gave me a lot to think about. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, well, this is great to catch up on your podcast. And it seems like you're going to be building probably the next version of Disney for topics like these.
Yeah. Cool, man. Thanks again.